What would you do if an entire studio turned against you, calling you impossible to work with, while your royal husband was thousands of miles away, pacing and fuming on the phone? Imagine walking onto a set that was supposed to mark your triumphant return to acting, only to find every glance, every whisper, every subtle sigh loaded with tension, just because of you. That was Meghan Markle's world the moment she stepped into Amazon MGM Studios to begin work on her latest project, Close Personal Friends. It was meant to be glamorous, a high-profile comeback, a chance to remind Hollywood that she was not only a duchess but a bankable star. But things went sideways almost immediately, and the ripples were felt far beyond the studio walls. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. In the first few hours of filming, insiders say the tension was palpable. Crew members whispered behind cameras, producers exchanged uneasy glances, and writers began quietly documenting every confrontation. Words like bossy, demanding, and impossible to satisfy started to circulate in private chats, and by the end of day one, the chatter had already leaked to the ears of Amazon MGM executives. But the drama wasn't just happening behind the scenes. Someone called Prince Harry. And that call changed everything. You might think, surely a Hollywood actress, especially someone of Meghan's experience, could handle a day on set. But Meghan wasn't just an actress. She was a duchess, and some say that combination made her expectations non-negotiable. The project's producers had signed her on, thinking her star power would elevate the show. They had no idea how intense the clash would be between her vision and their structure. They thought they were getting a talented performer. Instead, they were stepping into a storm, a whirlwind of rewrites, creative demands, and on-set confrontations that no one expected, least of all Harry. Why does this matter now? Because Meghan signing on to Close Personal Friends wasn't just about acting. It was a high-stakes chess move. After the Netflix controversies, after the deals that fell through, and after whispers about her inability to work with certain crews, this project was supposed to mark a clean slate. But Hollywood remembers, and studios keep records. Leaks happen. Reputations hang in the balance. And in Meghan's case, it wasn't just her career, her public image, her personal relationships, and yes, her royal connection were all on the line. Early reports suggested that Meghan's demands weren't subtle. Sources say she requested multiple rewrites of the script, insisted on changes to lighting, wardrobe, and blocking, and even questioned the director's choices. Crew members described the atmosphere as charged, almost hostile, and some claimed the energy on set shifted from professional to tense within minutes. These are the moments that studios dread. When an actor disrupts the workflow, when a star's personality clashes with the production team, it isn't just a minor hiccup. It's a crisis in the making, and it happened right under the noses of executives who thought they were prepared. But here's the twist. Meghan wasn't acting alone in her approach. She had Harry. Sources claim that after the first on-set incidents, Meghan picked up the phone and called her husband. What he reportedly said next shocked staffers, who later described the call as furious and unprecedented in intensity. Harry, who is not typically involved in day-to-day production matters, allegedly became a full-blown advocate for Meghan in ways that blurred the line between personal loyalty and professional interference. Staff members later said that the mix of Meghan's assertiveness and Harry's protective rage created an environment that became unsustainable. The studio executives found themselves in a position they had never faced, balancing a high-profile star's creative vision against the demands of a global production, all while managing the PR fallout that was already starting to emerge. Meanwhile, whispers in Hollywood started circulating. Former co-stars, agents, and even some industry insiders who had observed Meghan's previous projects quietly speculated that this could be a repeat of old patterns. Suits Meghan versus Duchess Meghan, where the persona off-screen impacted the on-screen work. Anonymous sources painted a picture of a set where tension was not just visible, it was documented. Crew members were reportedly keeping logs, noting interactions, and even creating unofficial reports of incidents. This documentation would later become pivotal when internal discussions at Amazon MGM reached a critical point. It's worth pausing here to consider the stakes. For Meghan, this was more than a job. This was a return to relevance, a demonstration that she could navigate Hollywood while retaining her royal identity. For Harry, it was about protecting his wife, but it also inadvertently added fuel to a fire that the studio could not ignore. For Amazon MGM, it was about protecting their production, their staff, and ultimately their investment. All three forces, Meghans' ambition, Harry's fury, and Hollywood's pragmatic caution, were on a collision course, and the impact would ripple across multiple arenas: media coverage, social media speculation, and, most importantly, the narrative that Meghan herself had tried to control for years. So what exactly happened on set that first day? Sources say it began innocuously enough. A morning read-through, some casual remarks from the crew, and Meghan asking for slight adjustments. But slight adjustments became significant rewrites. Rewrites became demands, and demands became confrontations. There are even reports of a specific scene where Meghan allegedly stopped production mid-take, refusing to continue until her vision was implemented. Cameras stopped rolling, and crew members were left waiting, frustrated, and unsure how to proceed. This is a situation any studio dreads. When the workflow halts, tension escalates, and tempers flare. In this instance, it wasn't just about the immediate scene. It was about a pattern that staffers say was forming from day one. And then came the leaks. A voicemail from an Amazon MGM executive, meant to be internal, was reportedly circulated. In it, the executive expressed deep concern about Meghan's behavior, using words that painted a stark picture of a set in turmoil. Once that voicemail was out, the story took on a life of its own. Hollywood loves drama, and the tabloids are relentless. Suddenly, Meghan's actions weren't just a private studio concern. They became public fodder, examined, dissected, and debated by millions. Meanwhile, Harry's reaction, calling staffers, demanding clarifications, and expressing fury over how his wife was being treated, added another layer to the unfolding drama. The situation was now not only about a disrupted production, but about the collision of Hollywood and royalty, ambition and loyalty, perception and reality. Why does this resonate so strongly with audiences? Because Meghan represents more than an actress. She represents the intersection of fame, power, and expectation. She represents the modern struggle of navigating personal ambition under public scrutiny. And in this case, the stakes couldn't be higher. Her Hollywood comeback, her marriage, her public image, and her financial opportunities were all intertwined, creating a perfect storm that nobody could easily contain. Every whisper, every memo, every frustrated sigh on set carried weight, because in the world of high-profile productions, perception is reality, and once perception starts to shift, it can be nearly impossible to regain control. As the first day turned into the second, insiders say that the studio quietly began preparing for multiple contingencies. Could Meghan be asked to leave? Could the production continue without her? Could Harry's interventions be mitigated? These questions swirled in executive meetings, alongside discussions about PR, legal considerations, and damage control. For Meghan, the stakes were intensely personal. For Harry, they were deeply emotional. And for Amazon MGM, they were existential. A disrupted production with a star that generated headlines was not just a scheduling issue. It was a potential financial catastrophe. By the end of that first week, the story had already leaked to Hollywood insiders, the tabloids, and some social media commentators. A narrative began to form. Meghan was difficult, bossy, overbearing. Harry was furious and unrealistic in defending his wife. Amazon MGM was caught in the middle, trying to salvage a project that was quickly becoming a case study in celebrity-induced chaos. And the most dramatic twist? None of this had even reached the peak moment. The day the studio allegedly made the decision to remove Meghan from set temporarily. That decision, insiders say, would set off a chain reaction, forcing public statements, private negotiations, and intense behind-the-scenes strategizing that nobody saw coming. So, what does this mean for Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, and Hollywood? The stakes are enormous, the drama is real, and the fallout has only just begun. From a studio's perspective, it's a cautionary tale of what happens when star power, creative control, and personal loyalty collide in high-pressure environments. From Meghan's perspective, it's a story of ambition, conflict, and the harsh realities of public perception. And from Harry's perspective, it's a tale of loyalty, protection, and the lengths he will go to defend his wife, even when it risks escalation. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What would you do if Hollywood itself seemed to hold its breath the moment your name appeared on a project? That was the exact scene the moment Meghan Markle officially signed on to close personal friends. The news wasn't just another casting update, it was seismic. Emails buzzed through executive offices, Slack messages lit up with reactions, and whispers of disbelief threaded through writers' rooms across Los Angeles. Why? Because Meghan wasn't just any actress. She was the former Suits star who had become a duchess, a public figure whose every move was dissected by the media, and now, a Hollywood comeback artist stepping into a high-stakes game where ambition, image, and ego collide. Inside Amazon MGM, the mood was electric, but not in the way anyone had hoped. Sources reveal that initial reactions were mixed at best. Some executives were thrilled. Meghan's presence could bring global attention, social media traction, and a boost in subscriptions. But others were wary. "We've seen the headlines, we've heard the stories," one anonymous producer reportedly said. "She's talented, yes, but there's a pattern. We have to be careful." This pattern wasn't some idle speculation. It was drawn from her history on previous sets, her publicized clashes with media outlets, and even rumors of on-set tension during previous film projects. Hollywood is unforgiving. One misstep, one rumor, and an entire career trajectory can be rewritten overnight. So how did Meghan's arrival come together? According to insiders, the negotiations were meticulous. Her team outlined everything: the scope of her role, the creative latitude she expected, and even minute details like the wardrobe and on-set accommodations. The studio was initially enthusiastic, seeing this as a rare opportunity to merge star power with streaming content. But as Meghan's demands stacked up, unease grew. Directors who were supposed to shepherd the production found themselves wondering if they were truly in charge, or if they were merely facilitators for a star accustomed to having the world bend around her. And that was before the first day of filming even began. Imagine a set prepped for a seamless opening, cameras in position, lights perfectly angled, and then the star arrives with a binder in one hand and a long list in the other. "We need to change this. This isn't accurate. The lighting has to shift. The dialogue has to match reality," she allegedly said, according to anonymous sources. The crew reportedly exchanged nervous glances. "This wasn't expected," one staffer told reporters. "Usually, we get notes, sure, but this level of control? It was intimidating." The public might not grasp the stakes here. Hollywood doesn't just thrive on talent, it thrives on collaboration. Each department, writers, directors, costume designers, lighting technicians, relies on a delicate balance of respect, hierarchy, and timing. When a single individual, no matter how famous, disrupts that balance, it creates ripples that can turn into tsunamis. And in Meghan's case, those ripples were enormous. Insiders suggest that on the very first call with studio executives post-announcement, her team already had a laundry list of creative modifications. Producers were reportedly nodding, scribbling notes, and trying to gauge how much flexibility the project could withstand without derailing schedules or budgets. But then came the rumors of tension, early warnings that the announcement alone had created a set of expectations the crew hadn't anticipated. Sources claim that some staff members were already quietly documenting interactions, taking mental notes of every demand, every critique, and every adjustment. This wasn't paranoia. It was standard protocol in high-profile productions. Hollywood knows that once a narrative about a difficult actor spreads, it can escalate quickly, potentially jeopardizing not only the project, but everyone associated with it. And with Meghan, that narrative had the potential to explode faster than most. Yet, not all reactions were negative. There were pockets of excitement. Some crew members reportedly saw this as a once-in-a-lifetime chance to work alongside a globally recognized figure who also had the aura of royalty. The allure of connecting with someone in Meghan's position, professionally and socially, was compelling. But even amid the excitement, caution persisted. "There's this tension," one executive explained. "You want the celebrity draw, but you don't want the celebrity control. There's a fine line, and with Meghan, that line is very thin." The tension wasn't just internal. As news of Meghans' involvement leaked outside the studio, Hollywood chatter became more pointed. Former co-stars, social media commentators, and industry insiders all began speculating about how this would play out. Would Meghan handle the pressures of modern Hollywood again, after years away? Could she navigate the complexities of high-profile streaming productions without alienating staff? Or would her royal experience, her sense of entitlement, and her intense desire for perfection clash with the rigid structures of professional studios? What made this announcement particularly explosive was the timing. Netflix had recently dropped her previous projects, leaving her without a major platform, and her public image had been under scrutiny. Critics questioned whether she could successfully return to acting while navigating her role as a duchess, her publicized media battles, and the expectations of a global audience. Amazon MGM betting on her was a high-stakes gamble. The gamble was risky not just financially, but reputationally. If she succeeded, the studio would bask in the glow of a triumphant Hollywood comeback. If she failed, the fallout could be catastrophic, not just for Meghan, but for everyone involved. Sources suggest that the first internal meetings following the announcement were tense. Executives debated how much creative control to grant, how much oversight to impose, and how to manage the inevitable PR storm that would follow if tensions arose. One senior producer reportedly stated, "We knew we were walking a tightrope. One misstep, and this could become a public spectacle." That foresight, however, did not prevent the ensuing chaos that began within hours of Meghan's first appearance on set. What had seemed like an ordinary Hollywood announcement quickly turned into a powder keg waiting for a spark. And that spark came in the form of Meghan herself. According to multiple insider accounts, she arrived with clear intentions to assert her vision, ensure every detail reflected her preferences, and set the tone for what she believed the show should be. This wasn't unusual for top-tier stars, but in Meghan's case, her celebrity came with additional weight: the royal title, the media scrutiny, and the global attention. The combination created an almost unparalleled intensity on set, forcing producers and crew to navigate a minefield of expectations, ego, and diplomacy. But the most explosive part of this story wasn't what happened on set. It was what happened after the announcement reverberated. Leaks began to emerge, highlighting alleged disagreements, tensions, and the crew's frustrations. Hollywood loves a narrative of drama, and the timing was perfect for it. Former colleagues hinted at Meghan's high standards, media outlets speculated about on-set meltdowns, and anonymous sources amplified every story, creating a narrative that the studio could no longer ignore. What was supposed to be a celebratory announcement had transformed into a cautionary tale in the making. Then came Harry. Sources claimed that as tensions escalated, Meghan's team reached out to him. What reportedly followed was an unprecedented series of calls and messages, fueled by loyalty, concern, and mounting frustration. Harry, normally a figure on the periphery of Hollywood productions, suddenly became a central player. His interventions, described by insiders as fiery and unrelenting, added fuel to the fire, complicating what was already a volatile situation. The studio executives were now caught between a globally recognized star asserting her creative control and a protective husband whose influence could sway public perception in ways they could not predict. By the time the first week concluded, Amazon MGM executives were quietly assessing their options. Should they accommodate Meghan's demands fully, attempt to compromise, or take more drastic measures? Reports suggest the discussions were heated, confidential, and fraught with the possibility of public fallout. In a Hollywood ecosystem where perception can be as important as production quality, every decision mattered, and every internal memo had the potential to become tomorrow's headline. And yet, despite all the tension, no one could predict how quickly things would escalate. The announcement that seemed like the start of a promising new chapter for Meghan and a boon for Amazon MGM was only the beginning. The drama that would unfold, phone calls, memos, confrontations, and leaks, was about to make this one of the most talked-about productions in Hollywood history. The stakes were no longer just creative. They were personal, professional, and global. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when Hollywood's polished studios suddenly collide with royalty? That was the precise storm brewing the moment Meghan Markle officially signed on to star in Close Personal Friends. It wasn't just a casting choice. It was seismic, a headline-grabbing event that sent ripple effects through every corner of Amazon MGM studios and beyond. Emails flew across executive inboxes, Slack channels lit up, and whispers filled the halls like static electricity before a lightning strike. Why such an intense reaction? Because Meghan wasn't merely an actress returning to a role. She was a former Suits star turned Duchess, a global figure whose every decision was amplified by the press and dissected by millions worldwide. For the studio, the announcement was a double-edged sword. On one hand, Meghan's involvement promised instant publicity, a guaranteed social media frenzy, and potential subscriber growth. Executives anticipated buzz that could rival major film releases. On the other hand, it carried risk, a risk that had nothing to do with talent or fame and everything to do with control. Insiders described the first executive meetings after her signing as tense, a mixture of excitement and dread. Some were elated by the possibilities. Others were silently worrying that they had just opened Pandora's box. The negotiations themselves were intense. Meghan's team laid out a meticulously detailed roadmap: script approval, wardrobe influence, scene adjustments, even decisions about set design. They expected a high degree of creative control. Amazon MGM initially agreed to many of her terms, thinking it was worth it for the publicity and potential success of the series. But unease lingered beneath the surface. "We knew this wasn't just an actress," one anonymous producer later revealed. "This was someone used to making the rules, someone with influence that extended far beyond the set." The tension wasn't paranoia, it was an awareness of patterns. Meghan's history of high-profile public conflicts and media scrutiny meant any disruption could quickly escalate into a scandal. Even before the first day of filming, the staff began bracing for friction. Crew members, directors, and producers prepared for a delicate dance, allowing Meghan creative space while maintaining the production structure. They knew the stakes. A disrupted production schedule could lead to budget overruns, negative press, and a ripple effect of rumors that would be impossible to contain. One insider described the early mood as electric with tension, like walking into a room charged with static, everyone waiting to see who would make the first move. The story took a dramatic turn with Meghan's very first on-set appearance. Sources say she arrived with a binder in hand, filled with notes, scene revisions, and precise directions. Her requests, which initially seemed small, adjustments to dialogue or lighting, soon became substantial rewrites. The crew reportedly exchanged uneasy glances as Meghan asserted her vision. Staff members who had worked on high-profile productions warned that this level of control was unusual, and that her combination of celebrity and royal authority created an entirely new dynamic that most on-set teams had never encountered. But this wasn't just about professional boundaries, it was personal. Meghan's expectations reflected her experience in both Hollywood and royal life. She demanded that her on-screen portrayal, wardrobe, and even set interactions reflect a level of perfection that some found intimidating. The studio's standard operating procedures, usually enough to handle demanding stars, suddenly felt insufficient. The crew began quietly documenting incidents, recording interactions, and preparing internal reports, knowing that the stakes were unusually high. In Hollywood, perception is everything, and these early tensions would soon make headlines, even if they weren't yet public. While internal nerves grew, external reactions began to mount. Hollywood insiders, former colleagues, and social media commentators speculated about what Meghan's involvement would mean for the production. Would her royal status complicate the logistics of filming? Would her high-profile marriage to Prince Harry affect interactions with staff or producers? Could she navigate the pressures of modern Hollywood after years in a different spotlight? These questions amplified the tension in both predictable and unpredictable ways. Meanwhile, Prince Harry became a key, if unconventional, part of the narrative. Reports suggest that after the initial incidents on set, Meghan contacted Harry. Sources describe his responses as intense and furious. He reportedly called executives, questioning how Meghan was being treated and asserting that she deserved both respect and creative control. Staff members later described him as visibly angry. creating a ripple effect of tension that extended beyond the studio walls. Suddenly, this was no longer merely a story about a celebrity returning to acting. It was a collision of Hollywood, royalty, and personal loyalty, each with stakes that were both tangible and highly public. Internal discussions within Amazon MGM became increasingly fraught. Executives debated how much latitude to provide Meghan without compromising workflow or morale. Some advocated for compromise, hoping to preserve both the star and the production's integrity. Others pushed for stricter boundaries, fearing that unchecked demands could derail the entire project. Every decision carried risk, too lenient, and the production suffered, too rigid, and public relations crises could emerge. The situation was further complicated by leaks. Internal memos, anonymous staff reports, and unofficial commentary began circulating within industry circles, all pointing toward tension on set. Then came the leaks. A voicemail from an Amazon MGM executive, intended as an internal communication, reportedly surfaced in industry circles. In it, the executive expressed concern about Meghan's behavior, describing the growing strain on the crew and the production. Once the voicemail leaked, Hollywood buzzed. Social media erupted with speculation, former Suits co-stars weighed in, and the tabloids had their next headline. What was once a contained studio issue had become a global talking point. This wasn't just professional drama, it was personal. Harry's protective instincts reportedly escalated, intensifying internal and external pressures. Staffers described a unique dynamic. Meghan asserting her creative vision, Harry defending her actions, and executives attempting to maintain control amidst growing chaos. Hollywood insiders who observed the early stages of filming suggested this combination of celebrity, royalty, and personal intervention created an unprecedented environment on set, where the normal rules of production no longer seemed to apply. By the end of the first week, the tension had already begun to affect morale. Sources claimed that the crew, writers, and even some producers were questioning whether the project could proceed as originally planned. The announcement that had been intended as a celebration of Meghan's return to acting had turned into the opening salvo of a story filled with friction, leaked memos, and growing speculation. Hollywood thrives on drama, but in this case, the drama wasn't scripted. It was unfolding in real time, with consequences for everyone involved. And yet, despite the tension, excitement lingered. There were those on set eager to work with a figure of Meghan's stature, intrigued by the rare opportunity to navigate her dual identity as a duchess and actress. But the reality of balancing her expectations, Harry's involvement, and production demands created a constant undercurrent of stress. Each day on set became a balancing act, managing creative input, maintaining professionalism, and preparing for potential public scrutiny. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. 3 minutes into the first rehearsal, Meghan Markle reportedly stopped everything. Cameras rolling, crew poised, actors mid-dialogue. She simply halted the production. Some sources say it was a line she didn't like. Others claim it was a lighting issue. Whatever the reason, the effect was immediate. A hush fell over the set, and the tension became palpable. For a studio that thrives on precision, timing, and workflow, this was a nightmare in motion. Staff members whispered, producers exchanged tense glances, and even seasoned directors admitted they weren't prepared for the storm that had arrived with Meghan Markle. It's worth pausing here to imagine the scene. Lights adjusted to perfection, cameras aligned, makeup and wardrobe meticulously done, and then a single voice from the top of the hierarchy brings everything to a standstill. The crew had been told that Meghan was a professional, talented, and experienced. But experience alone doesn't always translate to collaboration. This was the first day on set, and already the crew felt an unease that would only intensify in the hours to come. According to anonymous sources, the atmosphere became a mixture of awe, frustration, and uncertainty. Some staff admired her confidence. Others, already accustomed to managing demanding stars, felt that this was something different entirely. It wasn't just assertiveness, one crew member said. It was a sense that nothing could happen on this set without her approval. And the funny thing was, she hadn't even started filming yet. The tension wasn't limited to minor on-set adjustments. Reports suggest that Meghan began making significant requests regarding the set itself. Camera angles, lighting, wardrobe adjustments, even dialogue inflection were suddenly under her scrutiny. Crew members who had years of experience on high-profile productions were reportedly caught off guard. They had seen stars make demands, yes, but Meghans' approach allegedly went beyond standard actor input. Some called it preemptive control. Others described it as orchestrated perfectionism. Whatever term you use, it set the tone for a tense, emotionally charged environment. But it wasn't just Meghans' behavior that made the first day difficult. It was also the way she communicated. Sources describe a sharp, precise manner, combined with a refusal to accept standard production protocols. What might have been a simple suggestion from a co-star turned into an extended discussion with Meghan about how her vision differed from the director's. And while discussions are normal on set, insiders emphasize that the intensity, frequency, and public nature of these disagreements were unusual, especially for someone who had not yet fully immersed herself in the production. Complicating matters was Harry. Although he wasn't physically present, his involvement reportedly began almost immediately. Meghans' team allegedly contacted him after initial tensions arose. The phone calls, described by some staffers as frantic and furious, involved Harry questioning production decisions, defending Meghans' requests, and asserting that her creative input needed to be respected. For a studio accustomed to managing stars internally, the involvement of a global figure, whose influence extended far beyond Hollywood, added a level of stress few had ever experienced. Crew members reportedly tried to manage the situation by maintaining professionalism, documenting incidents, and anticipating what might come next. Even simple adjustments, such as changing a camera angle, required lengthy discussions with Meghan, leaving staff unsure whether to proceed or wait for her approval. Some claimed the tension created a sense of paralysis on set. The usual rhythm of a production, efficient, collaborative, predictable, had been replaced with a careful negotiation at every step. The first scene scheduled for filming, which was supposed to run smoothly, became the epicenter of on-set tension. According to insiders, Meghan insisted on multiple takes, reworked dialogue, and adjustments to blocking that had not been approved by the director. Actors reportedly expressed frustration but were cautious, knowing that challenging a star with royal connections could have personal and professional repercussions. The situation escalated when Meghan reportedly requested that certain crew members leave the immediate set area during a take, a move that some sources say was unprecedented. But it wasn't all confrontation. Some staff acknowledged that Meghan's attention to detail and insistence on high standards did result in improvements. Scenes were sharper, wardrobe details more precise, and certain technical elements enhanced. Yet, the emotional toll on the crew was undeniable. Hours into the first day, multiple staff members reportedly took mental notes, documenting incidents, disagreements, and adjustments. These records would later become key in understanding the unfolding drama, as they captured the raw dynamics of a set under extraordinary pressure. Adding to the drama was the leaking of early tensions to industry insiders. Anonymous sources shared accounts of disagreements, production delays, and staff frustration with select journalists. Hollywood loves a narrative of conflict, and the story quickly gained traction in trade publications, online forums, and social media. Suddenly, what was intended to be a contained, internal challenge on set became a topic of broader discussion. Observers outside the studio speculated about Meghans' behavior, the impact on production, and the potential fallout for Amazon MGM. Internal memos reportedly emphasized the need for caution and diplomacy. Studio executives warned staff not to engage with the press, to keep discussions about on-set tensions confidential, and to focus on maintaining workflow. Yet, with leaks circulating, controlling the narrative became nearly impossible. Each new email, each whispered conversation, and each social media post had the potential to escalate the situation. The combination of Meghans' assertiveness, Harry's protective interventions, and the crew's growing awareness of public scrutiny created a volatile environment that few had ever seen on a first day of filming. Sources also describe moments of humor and irony amid the tension. Some crew members reportedly joked quietly about Suits Meghan versus Duchess Meghan, noting how her dual identities created both admiration and anxiety. Others used analogy and storytelling to cope with the stress, likening the day to navigating a storm while simultaneously being filmed. These coping mechanisms, however, did little to reduce the intensity of the situation. The culmination of the first day reportedly occurred during a scene that should have run smoothly. Meghan allegedly requested multiple adjustments simultaneously: line changes, camera repositioning, and a reconfiguration of props. Staff members reportedly expressed concern, suggesting that the changes could delay production and increase costs. Meghan, sources say, insisted that the adjustments were essential for her vision. Tensions escalated to the point where producers reportedly held a brief, closed-door meeting to determine how to proceed. Meanwhile, Harry's involvement continued behind the scenes. He allegedly called key staff members, questioning their treatment of Meghan and asserting that her creative input should be honored. According to insiders, his calls were intense, urgent, and highly emotional, further complicating an already tense environment. The combination of Meghan's on-set assertiveness and Harry's off-set advocacy created a dynamic that left executives scrambling for solutions. By the end of the first day, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. What began as excitement about a high-profile casting announcement had transformed into a complex web of tension, negotiation, and scrutiny. The crew, producers, and executives were acutely aware that the stakes were no longer just about completing a scene. They were about managing personalities, reputation, and public perception. And yet, despite the friction, the production was only just beginning. If the first day was this intense, insiders predicted that the coming days would be exponentially more challenging. The seeds of conflict had been sown, and the studio, the crew, and the public would soon witness the full scope of the drama. But what came next, the confrontation that would push the studio to the brink, was something no one on set, or even in the executive offices, could have anticipated. Imagine this. You're a seasoned Hollywood writer, your coffee is lukewarm, the deadlines are looming, and suddenly the lead actress, someone with global fame, royal connections, and an unyielding sense of vision, walks into your writer's room with a binder full of notes. Each page is filled with demands, adjustments, and revisions that she expects to be implemented immediately. This wasn't a hypothetical scenario for the close personal friends team. It was their reality when Meghan Markle arrived for the first full rewrite session. The writers, many of whom had decades of experience, reportedly felt a mixture of awe, intimidation, and rising anxiety. Meghan didn't just ask for minor tweaks. She requested significant changes that altered the tone, pacing, and even the underlying motivations of the characters. Sources suggest that entire dialogue exchanges were scrapped on the spot, replaced with lines that mirrored Meghan's personal experiences or projected an image she wanted to cultivate. What should have been a collaborative brainstorming session quickly morphed into a high-pressure negotiation, with every word scrutinized, debated, and often vetoed. It wasn't just the scope of the rewrites that created tension, it was the timing. Filming schedules were tight, the studio had invested millions, and production couldn't afford delays. Yet Meghan's demands, according to insiders, forced the writers into marathon sessions that stretched late into the night. Coffee, fast food, and sheer determination became the tools of survival. One anonymous writer reportedly said, "It was like juggling on a tightrope during an earthquake. You never knew what would fall next, and you had to keep all the balls in the air." The requests weren't always simple line edits. Sources describe scenes being rewritten entirely to reflect Meghan's perception of character dynamics. Some adjustments were reportedly minor, slightly more emotional inflection here, a subtle gesture there, but others were major. Entire plot points were restructured, dialogue was shifted to emphasize themes Meghan wanted highlighted, and new scenes were added to align more closely with her desired narrative. Writers reportedly felt trapped between artistic integrity, production timelines, and the reality of negotiating with a globally scrutinized star. But Meghan didn't operate in a vacuum. She reportedly expected the director, producers, and even co-stars to participate actively in her vision. Scenes were paused multiple times while she explained her interpretation, demanded adjustments, and directed actors on tone, pacing, and even body language. Crew members, particularly those who had worked on the original Suits productions or similar Hollywood series, reportedly recognized her attention to detail. but were concerned about the scale of disruption. According to insiders, tensions in the writer's room reached a peak when Meghan insisted on reconfiguring a pivotal scene that had already been storyboarded and partially filmed in rehearsal. She wanted to inject personal experiences into the dialogue, drawing from her life as a duchess and actress. Writers reportedly pushed back, explaining that such a shift could affect continuity, character development, and production logistics. The disagreement, sources say, escalated quickly, creating a charged atmosphere in a room that was normally structured and calm. It wasn't just the writers who were affected. Producers began receiving urgent emails detailing every revision, including annotations on timing, dialogue, and shooting schedules. These memos, meant to keep production on track, reportedly only added to the pressure. Staff members were caught between implementing Meghan's demands, keeping the production timeline intact, and managing the growing stress levels in the room. Some sources describe the situation as walking a tightrope with fire on both ends. Any misstep could ignite a full-blown crisis. The dynamics between Meghan and the writers reportedly became a point of concern for studio executives. Some sources claim that producers considered whether granting her extensive creative control was sustainable. Others worried that her approach could create a lasting precedent for future projects. "We've handled demanding stars before," one insider explained. But the combination of her fame, royal status, and personal vision created an entirely new kind of pressure. Every suggestion was scrutinized, every decision magnified. Amid this tension, there were moments of humor and irony. Writers reportedly joked quietly about Duchess director and royal rewrite, acknowledging the absurdity while coping with the intensity. These small levity points, however, did little to mitigate the ongoing stress. By the third day of rewrites, insiders report that some writers were physically exhausted, mentally drained, and emotionally tense. One noted, "It felt like we were running a marathon that kept getting longer with no finish line in sight." The pressure also affected co-stars. According to sources, actors were required to run multiple takes and adjust performances mid-scene based on the ongoing rewrites. Some reportedly struggled to maintain consistency, as the tone of scenes shifted unpredictably. Actors expressed concerns privately, noting that the intensity was unlike any previous project they had worked on. The environment, sources say, was simultaneously collaborative and confrontational, requiring extreme adaptability from everyone involved. At the same time, Meghan's team reportedly kept Harry in the loop. Phone calls from Meghan and updates from her representatives added another layer of complexity. Sources indicate that Harry's involvement, while well-intentioned, heightened the pressure on the writers and production staff. Studio executives were aware that any decision or pushback could be scrutinized not only internally, but also through a royal lens, magnifying stakes that would normally be contained to the studio. The rewrites also had logistical consequences. Scenes planned for later days had to be rescheduled, set design adjustments were accelerated, and wardrobe teams were forced to reconfigure costumes to match the new vision. According to sources, production schedules were strained, budgets threatened, and crew members were constantly adapting to changes that sometimes came without warning. The ripple effect of these revisions was significant, affecting departments across the entire studio ecosystem. Despite the stress, there were moments of progress. Scenes reportedly improved in certain technical aspects. Actors delivered more nuanced performances, and some writers acknowledged that Meghan's input had merit. However, these moments were overshadowed by the constant negotiation and pressure. Sources describe a pattern. Tension builds, adjustments are made, minor improvements occur, and then a new set of demands arises, creating a perpetual cycle that left the team emotionally and physically drained. By the end of the first week of rewrites, insiders report that the writer's room was on edge. Staff members were documenting incidents meticulously, anticipating potential fallout. Concerns about leaks, media scrutiny, and public perception were ever present. In addition, studio executives reportedly held emergency meetings to assess how much creative control to continue granting, how to maintain production schedules, and how to navigate the increasingly complex dynamic with Meghan and Harry. And then came the pivotal moment. One particular rewrite request was deemed so extensive that producers reportedly debated whether the changes could be implemented at all without derailing the project entirely. This was not just a matter of lines or blocking. It was a fundamental restructuring of a key episode that affected continuity, character arcs, and production planning. The debate was intense, and according to insiders, it laid the foundation for the confrontation that would later rock the studio. But what came next? The confrontation between Meghan and the director, where tempers flared and boundaries were tested, would push the studio to a point no one thought possible. 3 days into filming, the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface finally erupted. Sources report that the confrontation between Meghan Markle and the director of Close Personal Friends was nothing short of explosive. It started subtly, as these things often do, with a difference of opinion over a single scene. A line delivery, a hand gesture, a camera angle. But within minutes, what seemed like a minor disagreement escalated into a full-blown standoff. Crew members reportedly froze in place, unsure whether to intervene, document, or simply watch the drama unfold. The director, a seasoned professional with decades of experience, had anticipated disagreements with actors, but what he encountered with Meghan was unprecedented. She allegedly challenged his decisions publicly, insisting that her vision must be implemented exactly as she imagined. Sources describe her tone as firm, unwavering, and, in the eyes of some staffers, intimidating. One crew member later recalled, "It wasn't disrespectful in a personal sense, it was precise, assertive. But combined with her presence, it made everyone in the room tense." According to insiders, the disagreement centered around a critical emotional scene. Meghan reportedly argued that the scene did not accurately reflect the character's inner turmoil and demanded changes that would alter the director's carefully planned blocking and camera work. She wanted close-ups, altered lines, and a completely new emotional cadence. The director pushed back, explaining that these changes were not feasible given the existing schedule, budget constraints, and continuity considerations. That pushback, however, only seemed to intensify Meghan's response. Sources indicate that she allegedly raised her voice, pacing across the set while articulating her demands. Crew members described a palpable shift in energy, one that left everyone on edge. Normally, disagreements like this are handled quietly or off-camera, one insider explained. This was different. It was visible, immediate, and everyone could feel the tension radiating through the set. The confrontation reportedly lasted for nearly half an hour, a period during which filming came to a complete halt. According to sources, actors were left waiting, camera crews paused mid-shot, and producers hovered, uncertain how to proceed. The scene, which had taken weeks to plan, suddenly became the focal point of a negotiation that involved not just creative differences, but personality clashes, expectations, and unspoken power dynamics. Adding to the intensity was Meghan's insistence on involving her team and, indirectly, Prince Harry. Sources claim that during this confrontation, her assistants were relaying updates via text and call to Harry, who reportedly became increasingly agitated as the situation unfolded. Crew members later described this as an unusual dynamic. Normally, directors and actors resolve differences internally, but the added presence of Meghan's external team and the knowledge that Harry was being updated in real time heightened the stakes considerably. The director reportedly attempted to de-escalate, explaining that adjustments could be made in a controlled way that preserved both creative integrity and production timelines. Meghan, however, was insistent, emphasizing that her interpretation of the scene was not negotiable. According to insiders, the room became a battleground of wills, each side believing strongly in their perspective, with the crew caught squarely in the middle. Sources suggest that the confrontation didn't end there. Meghan allegedly requested that certain crew members remove themselves from the immediate filming area, claiming they were influencing the outcome of the scene. Some staff members reportedly complied quietly, while others were confused and frustrated by the sudden shift in authority. Observers note that while stars often make demands, Meghan's combination of assertiveness, meticulous attention to detail, and high-profile visibility made this confrontation unlike any typical on-set disagreement. The intensity of the standoff reportedly triggered a series of internal communications among producers and studio executives. Emails and memos were circulated, documenting every moment, noting every deviation from standard procedure, and evaluating the potential impact on production. Some executives expressed concern that this single confrontation could set a precedent, creating an environment where creative control was continually contested and schedules became secondary to personal vision. Even as tensions boiled, Meghan continued to push her interpretation of the scene. According to sources, she guided actors through multiple takes, adjusting timing, line delivery, and body language, often pausing mid-take to demand corrections. Actors reportedly felt the pressure, knowing that every choice was being scrutinized and that the slightest deviation could spark another round of conflict. Crew members described the environment as tense and charged, a mixture of awe at her dedication and stress at the unrelenting intensity. Amid the confrontation, there were reportedly moments of humor and irony, though fleeting. Some crew members joked quietly about royal dictatorship meets Hollywood, using humor as a coping mechanism. Yet, these small attempts at levity did little to offset the emotional weight of the situation. Staffers were acutely aware that the events unfolding could have long-term repercussions for the project, for Meghan, and for the studio's reputation. The confrontation reached its climax when Meghan allegedly demanded that the scene be entirely reblocked to better reflect her interpretation, overriding the director's prior planning. According to insiders, the director had to make a split-second decision, push back and risk a protracted conflict, or concede and adjust the scene on the spot. Sources suggest that the director reluctantly agreed to some of Meghan's changes, while maintaining key elements to preserve continuity. This high-stakes confrontation, however, did not go unnoticed. Crew members reportedly began documenting every detail meticulously, understanding that these records could become critical if the conflict escalated further. Internal memos circulated among producers and executives, analyzing Meghan's demands, assessing the potential impact on morale, and weighing next steps. Observers noted that while Hollywood often tolerates star assertiveness, the combination of Meghan's royal status, celebrity influence, and external advocacy from Harry created a dynamic that required unprecedented attention. By the end of the confrontation, filming for that scene had finally resumed, but the mood remained tense. Sources indicate that both Meghan and the director maintained professionalism, but the emotional intensity lingered. Crew members described the aftermath as a mix of relief, apprehension, and fatigue. Everyone knew that the events of that day would be the first of several intense interactions, each carrying increasing stakes. And while the confrontation had reached a temporary resolution, insiders report that it set the stage for what many describe as the defining conflict of the production. The suspension and subsequent removal of Meghan from set, a decision that would involve studio executives, her team, and ultimately Prince Harry in ways that no one anticipated. But what came next? The producer's intervention and the escalation that would shake the studio to its core was about to change everything. When the dust settled from Meghan Markle's confrontation with the director, the tension on set didn't dissipate. It escalated. According to insiders, producers convened an emergency meeting in a glass-walled office just steps from the set, the air thick with anxiety. What should have been a routine discussion about scheduling and workflow turned into a strategic war room session. Emails were drafted, phone calls made, and contingency plans outlined. Some staffers described it as the calm before the storm, though no one in that room felt calm. The stakes were astronomical. The production was behind schedule, the crew was on edge, and the media had already begun sniffing around the story. Sources indicate that the producer's initial goal was simple: contain the situation and keep the production moving. But what they discovered was that Meghan's influence extended far beyond the camera. Her demands, backed by her team and indirectly by Prince Harry, left the producers walking a tightrope. Every choice risked creating more conflict, either on set or in the press. Studio executives, usually confident in their ability to manage high-profile stars, admitted privately that this situation was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The producer's strategy involved multiple layers. First, they attempted to mediate directly with Meghan, seeking compromises that would maintain both creative integrity and production efficiency. Sources suggest that they emphasized collaboration, offered concessions on minor adjustments, and tried to set boundaries on major scene rewrites. Meghan, however, was unwavering. Reports indicate that she insisted on maintaining her vision, citing her experience, public persona, and understanding of narrative storytelling as justification for the changes. As the day progressed, the intensity reportedly increased. Crew members observed Meghan walking the set with purpose, stopping to adjust camera angles, rearrange props, and direct actors mid-scene. While professionalism remained intact, the psychological impact on the team was evident. One source recalled, "People were nervous to make eye contact. Every step, every word, felt like it could trigger another conflict." Meanwhile, the producers struggled to maintain control, juggling creative oversight, budget constraints, and morale management. Tensions escalated further when Meghan reportedly demanded additional changes that affected multiple departments simultaneously: lighting, wardrobe, blocking, and dialogue. Each department head was forced to make split-second decisions, often deferring to Meghan's authority despite the potential impact on production. Staff members noted that while stars often have input, the scale and immediacy of Meghan's demands were extraordinary. It was as if the normal hierarchy had been inverted, placing her at the center of every decision, regardless of department or expertise. Amid this chaos, Prince Harry's involvement reportedly added a new layer of complexity. According to sources, Meghan's team provided real-time updates to Harry, who became increasingly concerned about the treatment of his wife. Multiple phone calls and messages were exchanged between Harry and senior producers, sources claim, with Harry expressing frustration at what he perceived as disregard for Meghan's creative authority. Some staff members described the situation as unprecedented. You have a star demanding changes, and then the world's media and the royal family influencing your every move behind the scenes. It was surreal. The producers, aware that their decisions could have long-term consequences, began documenting every interaction meticulously. Emails, memos, and internal notes recorded Meghan's requests, crew responses, and production adjustments. These documents would later be critical in understanding how the conflict unfolded, providing a paper trail that illuminated both the challenges and the attempts at resolution. In the midst of the escalating tension, sources report that producers attempted a direct intervention, a one-on-one conversation with Meghan. The goal was to set clear expectations while still respecting her creative input. But according to insiders, the meeting did not go as planned. Meghan allegedly argued for greater creative control, emphasizing that her interpretation was crucial to the authenticity and emotional resonance of the project. The producers, in turn, emphasized the practical limitations of filming schedules, budget constraints, and crew capacity. What was intended as a constructive conversation reportedly ended with heightened tension and a mutual awareness that compromises would be difficult. By late afternoon, the situation reportedly reached a boiling point. Meghan had requested a major rewrite of a pivotal scene, one that involved multiple actors, complex blocking, and extensive set adjustments. Producers reportedly debated whether to accommodate the request or push back, understanding that either decision carried risks. Approving the rewrite could cause scheduling delays and increased costs. Refusing it risked angering Meghan, escalating public scrutiny, and provoking Harry's involvement. Sources describe a pivotal moment during this debate. One producer suggested a temporary compromise, allowing Meghan to implement her changes for one take, with the understanding that the director would retain final approval for subsequent shots. Others argued that this would set a dangerous precedent, potentially giving Meghan unchecked authority on future scenes. The disagreement within the producers' team reportedly mirrored the broader conflict on set. The balance of power, influence, and creative control was in flux, and every decision was fraught with consequences. Meanwhile, the crew continued working, attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Actors reportedly struggled to adjust to the frequent changes, often being directed midline to alter performance according to Meghan's vision. Camera operators, lighting technicians, and wardrobe staff were caught in a constant state of adaptation, moving between departments to accommodate last-minute requests. The pace was intense, the pressure unrelenting and the stakes higher than ever. Adding to the chaos were rumors that leaks had started circulating. Staff members reportedly shared off-the-record accounts of the confrontation with colleagues outside the production, creating whispers that eventually reached journalists and industry insiders. The narrative began forming. Meghan was demanding, assertive, and difficult to work with. Harry was protective, angry, and involved. And Amazon MGM executives were scrambling to manage the situation. The public, though unaware of specifics, could already sense the storm brewing. As the day wore on, sources claimed that producers convened another emergency meeting. This time, the discussion reportedly turned toward the possibility of removing Meghan from the set temporarily. While the decision was fraught with risk, both publicly and professionally, it was considered as a last resort to maintain production, protect the crew, and preserve morale. The implications were enormous. A temporary removal could be perceived as punitive, potentially sparking backlash in the media and from Meghan's team. Yet, the producers felt they had little choice. By the end of the day, the set was quieter, but the tension lingered. Staff members reportedly reflected on the unprecedented nature of the events, the emotional strain, and the challenges of balancing celebrity influence, creative vision, and production logistics. One crew member summed up the mood. "We've had difficult stars before, but this was different. It wasn't just about ego or power, it was about control, loyalty, and public perception. Everyone knew the next move could change everything."